Kia ora, tena koto, tena koto, tena koto katoa. In Nuevo Mexico, mis montañas de sangre de Cristos. In Nuevo Mexico, mi rio, the Rio Grande. And let me just say, it's a real pleasure to be with all of you today. Fran, you mentioned having massive commercial experience. I do not have that, okay? The best I can do is that I was trained as a lawyer and I was a partner in a law firm, but I imagine most business people just feel about lawyers and the expenses as it's a questionable business expense. So I apologize for that, but in my 30 years of public service, I worked very much with business. I carried a couple of major pieces of legislation that we got beyond the line, and so I just want to say I think this is tremendously important, what you do, providing jobs, productivity, moving things forward, and I'm honored to be here today, and I thank Fran, New Zealand Air, Auckland Business Chamber for inviting me to join you, and I thank you, Simon, for introducing me. I loved reading Simon's book. I can tell you one thing, I learned a lot about New Zealand and the people of New Zealand doing that. And I'm not putting in a promotion, I'm not allowed to do that. But he told me last night he would sign them if you bought them. It's an honor to be here with Prime Minister Luxon, Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters. Wonderful to hear him in person and get a chance to engage with him. Minister for Trade Macleay, Dame Therese Walsh, and other esteemed leaders of the New Zealand and U.S. business communities. And I'd like to congratulate, and I really mean this, congratulate New Zealand on its recent elections. Free and fair elections, along with a smooth transfer of power, are the cornerstones of any democracy. And I think you gave a great example of what democracy's all about with what you did here. And I was just honored to be here, see the lead up to that, see the exchanges, and really, truly, you have a vital democracy. Doesn't mean, as Winston was saying, it's not being attacked by forces and other things out there, but you've got a strong one, pay attention to it, be vigilant, and you'll be in great shape. As one of the world's oldest continuous democracies, New Zealand provides a strong example to the world of how both can be carried out. My team and I look forward to continuing our work together to advance the New Zealand-U.S. bilateral relationship with the new government, confident that New Zealand's proud tradition of a cross-partisan approach to foreign policy will enable us to advance shared goals without interruption or distraction. The New Zealand-U.S. relationship is probably the strongest it has been in decades. The relationship is so strong because of our shared values and shared interests. We have a shared interest in supporting the rules-based international order and the multinational institutions on which it depends. As New Zealand's first ever national security strategy put it, and I was there when it was unveiled, and this was a very strong statement. It's been repeated here today, but it bears repeating again. From the national security strategy, the rules-based system is fundamental to our national security. This is equally true for the United States. Both our countries have recognized that these institutions are under threat, and we have a critical shared interest to work together to sustain them. And we have shared values that define who we are as countries. Those values include, and many of these have been mentioned, but they also bear repeating: democracy, transparency, rule of law, respect for human rights, free speech and free media, and religious tolerance. One of our paramount and shared interest is in advancing broad and inclusive prosperity in our own countries and around the world. Our strong trade and investment links also highlight how our economies are complementary. We invest in each other. Foreign direct investment between our two countries is the highest it has been since 2018. Last year, U.S. investors brought more than $1 billion to New Zealand's innovative private sector, a five-fold increase in just 5 years. While I have heard loud and clear, and Deputy Prime Minister, I heard it from you today, New Zealand's hope for a bilateral FTA, bilateral trade, continues to improve even without one. In the last 5 years, trade has expanded from 18 billion New Zealand dollars to 25 billion, and an increase of 37%. So, you know, there's talk here about getting your swagger. I think you're doing a lot right, and I really believe that in what I've observed here and over the last 2 years. In September, Secretary Blinken outlined the U.S. vision for the future. He described a world which is open, free, prosperous, and secure. A world where goods and ideas and individuals can flow freely and lawfully across land, sea, sky, and cyberspace. Where technology is used to empower people, not to divide, surveil, and repress them. A world where the global economy is defined by fair competition, openness, and transparency. Where prosperity is not measured only in how much countries' economies grow, but how many people share in that growth. I know an important value here. A world that generates a race to the top in labor and environmental standards, in health, education, infrastructure, technology, security, and opportunity. A world where international law and the core principles of the UN Charter are upheld, and where universal human rights are respected. Now, talking a little bit about strategic competitors and strategic competition. Our competitors, however, have a fundamentally different vision. They see a world defined by regime preservation and enrichment, where authoritarians are free to use force, economic pressure, and technology to control, coerce, and crush their own people, their neighbors, and anyone else standing in the way of their goals. Their actions undermine the hard-won peace, stability, and prosperity that the multilateral order has delivered for decades. We are working to advance shared goals in the region and globally on our U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. Our primary goals in the region include building the collective capacity of like-minded allies, partners, and friends to respond to the threats of climate change, cyber attacks, economic coercion, and corruption. Bolstering the rules-based regional order from which we all have benefited, creating and strengthening relationships, formal and informal, bilateral and multilateral, to promote these shared goals. Revitalizing our treaty alliances and key partnerships, including with New Zealand, and strengthening our relationships with regional institutions such as the Pacific Islands Forum, PIF, and ASEAN. Promoting other formal and informal groupings, including the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, which has been talked about by several of our speakers already, APEC, and Partners in the Blue Pacific. All of those have been discussed, so I don't think I need to spend an expensive amount of time on those. But we're also working with New Zealand and other partners in the Blue Pacific. This is an area that hasn't been mentioned as much, and I think is very important, to improve regional resilience in the face of disaster risk and climate change, to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and to build cyber capacity and coordination. Now, I wanted to just talk about two other issues before I finish. I want to leave time, so if Fran, or Simon, if I'm moving too fast, where are you there? Yeah. If I'm getting into question time, I'll wrap it down right now because I really do want to take questions. Okay, just a couple of more minutes. I am excited to see the announcement of Judith Collins as New Zealand's first ever Minister for Space, in addition to her roles as Minister for Digitizing Government and Minister for Science, Innovation, and Technology. We look forward to working with Minister Collins and others in your new government to advance rules and norms that will help our countries harness the benefits of emerging technology, including AI. Just this month, we brought together governments from around the world to sign a political declaration on the responsible military use of AI and autonomy. We look forward to discussing these issues and others as we move towards developing a U.S.-New Zealand technology dialogue. We want to continue to expand mutually beneficial trade. Let me make sure I'm not messing things up with the clicker there. And we want to continue in areas like quantum computing, AI, and aerospace, which constitute some of the fastest growing parts of the New Zealand economy. Once again, when you look at aerospace and you look at space itself and the business of fast-growing businesses, I think you're doing a lot right. I don't think this conference, from my perspective anyway, should be say that New Zealand isn't doing a good job in many, many areas. There's always ways to improve. In the aerospace sector, several innovative Kiwi companies are at the forefront of technological advancements in providing new high-wage green jobs, and with new investments in infrastructure and geographic and regulatory advantages, it's no surprise several U.S. aerospace companies have operations in New Zealand. Now, my good friend that served with me in the Senate, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson's visit earlier this year deepened our bilateral cooperation on aerospace issues. I think he spent more than 10 days here, traveling the country, tremendously excited about what you're doing. We look forward to continuing work with New Zealand's government and the aerospace innovators to continue advancing cooperation. So the next chapter, this being the United States Business Summit, I should also mention that my team at the U.S. Mission in New Zealand is committed to helping facilities bilateral trade and investment. For anyone in the audience interested in conducting business with the United States, please don't hesitate to reach out to the consulate here in Auckland, headed up by Sarah Nelson, or the embassy in Wellington. And I know Mike Hearn knows this well. I think he does that every now and then. Later today, Commercial Officer Eric Crowley will talk about investment ties and how Select USA, which you've already heard about, can help New Zealand companies interested in expanding into the United States. So in sum, I just want to say, as threats to our shared interest and values have increased, so have our bilateral cooperation and our shared commitment to engage with our partners. History has shown that societies working together are a formidable force. Together, we can uphold and improve the rules-based international system that has been fundamental to regional security, stability, and prosperity. This has been the essence of our partnership with New Zealand in the past and will continue to be the basis of our friendship for years to come. Thank you very much, and an honor to be here with you.
Let's take a seat, my friend.
Where do you want me to sit?
that going. Is that going there for you? Yeah. Hey, well, thank you so much, Senator Ambassador. You got that on? For those remarks. It's fantastic to hear you believe that the relationship's as good as it's ever been. I suppose to start you off, you've been here 2 years, have I got that right?
A little over 2 years.
And
Simon,
let's see, this one going? Now it's going.
Thank you.
It's good to see I'm the most technologically advanced person on this stage. It's fantastic.
I always knew that.
2 years. We in New Zealand, we love to fish for compliments. We purr like pussycats when people say nice things about our country. So your impressions, I'm just giving you a helpful hint there, be nice. And what surprised you about New Zealand?
The first thing I want to start with is observing your democracy for 2 years. I mean, I grew up with democracy as a kid. My dad was elected to Congress when I was 5 years old, so I saw it from his perspective, and I saw it through my life. And you have a very vibrant democracy here. It's working well. Simon, there's a lot of trust between your people. But don't forget, you always need to work at democracy. Democracy, I like to go to schools and talk to people, and one of the things I emphasize is that you just don't put somebody in office and assume they're going to do it right. You've got to challenge them. You've got to step forward with your ideas. And so protect it, nurture it, foster it, because you've got a wonderful thing going on here. And I think in some of those areas, you know the challenges we have in the United States, and that's why I appreciate so much what you have here. And it's very, very important as a model to the world,
Yeah, and Mr. Peters made that, I think, obviously true but remarkable statement. Out of 9, very long democracies, we represent a couple of them. This is a business summit. I appreciate the caveat you've made that don't see yourself as a businessman, but you're a distinguished, experienced American. I talked earlier and asked Christopher Luxon about the dynamism of the American economy. I suppose the question really is, though, you look at it with your experience and what you know about New Zealand now. What do you see as the areas that New Zealand businesses should be considered in America? What's your advice for New Zealand businesses around America? You've talked about space, but there may be other areas and issues you want to raise.
Well, I think in the world we live in, with the internet and all the services that are surrounding that, every business has an opportunity to break into the international market, to break into the United States. And so in many cases, it's just thinking through those kinds of issues. And that's why I was really sincere with Mike here to offer not only, come to the U.S. to select USA, but also talk to us if there are things that you want to see, you want to connect with. I can't tell you with my staff and all the work we've done, how many people we've connected with U.S. businesses or sectors of a business where people are interested. They say, I think I know this business well, but I think the United States knows it better, and so we hook them up. We bring speakers over here. We try to do everything we can in our public diplomacy area to expose people to all the wider issues that are out there. So as I said, I want to be very positive about what is being done here in New Zealand. I think you can always do things better, but I'm very, very impressed with what's going on. And in my additional little more than a year here, and I have a very capable deputy that'll take over when I depart at the end of the last election, at the end of the next election. We will continue to be a force in terms of trying to get you all together with Americans and American business in any way that's possible. By the way, I'll be here for most of the day, and so I'm happy to have you come up and ask me to step outside and talk about things. We want to move things along that are tremendously
Selfies
important.
with Tom Udall and book signings with Simon Bridges. You've got that after. I mean, I think you just mentioned it really. United States into New Zealand. I was, it doesn't surprise me, but the figure you gave, I think you said fivefold growth, $1 billion in inward investment. And I, for one, very pleased to see the new government's coalition documents, liberalisation of our Overseas Investment Act. The Prime Minister's just talked about that earlier. I think Bill Foley, an American who's here, invested in wine, about to do something great, it looks like, in football and stadiums possibly even. 1 billion could be more, actually. And to talk to me a bit about that, maybe.
Sure. No, it could be more, and that's why I've said that we want to work with you. We want to do everything we can. As a final comment, Simon. Prime Minister Luxon mentioned, working more with the diplomatic community. There's a great you have 50 countries that are on the ground here in New Zealand. They all have ideas. They're very eager to interact with business, to interact with government. And so don't forget about them. Don't forget about them, because Germany and France and all the Five Eyes countries, everybody, Japan, they have vital operations here, and they're very, very interested in engaging. So with that, I see the friends down here.
No, that's make believe. We were okay till 9.
Time is
I've got
up.
plenty. I got plenty more.
I don't want to
to
get Fran mad. Fran, by the way, I meant to say to you as a wrap up here. Last year when I came to this conference, I stayed the entire day, and I thought you did a fabulous job. And I thought, I don't know how she can outdo herself, but you did. So thank you. Thank you. It's been wonderful so far. It's going to be great after that.
But my friend, you just ignore that time and you just listen to my questions, all right? Don't worry about that time.
Go ahead. Fire away.
Two or three, and then we'll finish. Firstly, you talked about the United States competitors. Now, clearly, amongst others, you're referring to China. I'm not trying to get you in a diplomatic headline or anything here, but I would be interested in comments you might have around New Zealand's positioning on that as an independent country with an independent foreign policy. How do you think we're playing it? What would you like to see?
When I first arrived, the term independent foreign policy on the part of New Zealand kind of mystified me, and I asked Rosemary about this. I kept saying, what does that mean? And I think in the early period, what I concluded was New Zealand wanted very much to be a part of a multilateral decision-making process. So if the UN was going to move forward on something like tackling a horrible conflict or whatever, then they wanted to be fully behind it. But they were reluctant to get into the kind of the battle that's going on, that we're seeing increasing in the region, what you're calling many people are saying this tension in the Pacific, and a tension actually all over the world with China and the U.S. One of the things that, and last night, for those of you that were there, some people said, this is a binary choice. They said, you got to make a choice. I don't believe that, and I think the sophistication that Chris Seed and MFAT and everybody have put forward here is that where we are today with independent foreign policy and these latest defense and foreign policy documents is we have evolved to the place where New Zealand says, if we share the values and we have shared interests, then when something critical like the war in Ukraine where Russia invades, and the UN can't do anything, obviously, because Russia's a Security Council member and blocks any action by the Security Council. And I was so proud of New Zealand, Simon, standing up and saying, they passed legislation, we're going to make an exception. We're going to send trainers over to the UK to train Ukrainian troops. We're going to supply resources to humanitarian and other areas. And so you looked at the circumstances, you looked at what your values were, and you stepped forward. And so I thought this evolution of what the independent foreign policy is has been, I think it's been a very promising thing. I think it's a good thing for New Zealand. And let's remember, it's not just any one individual country. As I said in my closing, it's all of us working together as like-minded democracies, taking stands where we think there's a threat to the rules-based order, to the international order, and that's, I think that's a very promising thing that's going on, and I hope, Deputy Prime Minister Peters, that we will continue that for New Zealand to look at the situation. Obviously, and let me just conclude by saying, I fully understand your trade relationship with China. I mean, you all built your middle class on the kind of trade and commodities and things you have. We haven't had a chance to visit as much on dairy, and I hope to do that later. But all of these commodities, you built your middle class, and then when the UK many years ago went into the European Union, you had to get out in the world and figure out, how do we sell these products now that UK's not there? And you diversified tremendously. You're diversifying now. So there are many positive things that are going on. But I think the position that the last government took, and I don't know what the position of the future government's going to be, that we shouldn't be, and this was, I think, paraphrasing the words, we shouldn't be dependent on trade on any one country, and we need to try to diversify. And I think that's something that business people are taking seriously. So that's something that I think is also a part of this and a part of your question.
Winston talked about broadening our markets, and I want to come back to that very briefly. Quick fire, though, while we're still on geopolitics. Mr. Peters also was careful but warm about AUKUS, and we'll watch that space. I take it that the American position is it could be AUKUS, ZS, or whatever it would become in a heartbeat. Is that the US position?
No, Winston, the Deputy Prime Minister, as you know, there's AUKUS, which has been announced, and the three countries did that, and New Zealand has said, because of your nuclear policy here, that you don't want to move in that direction. But you've also said something that's tremendously important here, which is there are other parts to this. There's Pillar 2 or whatever you want to call it. I always call it the technology dialogue, where we look at the new things that are happening, both in defense and in the economic area, on AI, on quantum, and the list is very, very long, cybersecurity, and it goes on and on. And so I would just urge the new government to become involved. And we are happy. I was just over in Australia for an official visit with Ambassador Kennedy. They want to engage in this, and they want to engage not just with you, but other like-minded countries that want to talk about technology, dual-use technology, those kinds of things.
Finally, trade. I take your point. Look, we've gone from what were your numbers, 18 to $25 billion in two-way trade. That's, great progress. It's a very dynamic relationship. But, Winston makes the point. We've been waiting since 1939. Morocco, Chile. I could go on. But what's also true is, and thank you for your comments around the Ukraine, there is from a New Zealand perspective, concerning growth and isolationism in the United States and pushing away from these things. Your comments?
The thing that that you reminded me of when it comes to the issue of trade is how are we going to, as a world, move down the road on trade where parts of trade aren't used for bad purposes? And that's a big challenge, and that's part of what this strategic competition's all about, is how do we move down that road. But I think you have the strongest argument to make with the middle class and how you've brought your society along in terms of trade to argue to the world the benefits of trade. And believe me, every time a senior U.S. official has hit the ground here, the first request is always FTA. We're 19, and they go back. You took it back further than I've ever heard it, but it's just, but we understand that, and I just want to tell you, I mean, I really believe in trade. That's why I made the last comment. We're just in a tough place in terms of our. Both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have been jazzed up all on these anti-globalization, all these kinds of things, and there just aren't the votes there to move on any kind of trade. We're not picking you out. There's no place else in the world that we're doing free trade agreements. You know, the other thing to know is that you've been asking, but we're kind of saying no to everybody, but we're always trying to look. We're always trying to look for places that we can work with you. And we've heard about aluminum, we've heard about other industries, and Chris knows we're trying to work through all of those issues. So I think that the important thing is not only for you to ask for an agreement, but talk to the world about the benefits of trade, because trade has really built your society from the very beginning. You have such strong, rich resources here, and they've really made a difference for your society. They made a difference for the world that you trade with. And I want to say on the issue of, you know, you have so much moisture, so much precipitation, so much grass. The primo thing in America, the trendy kind of thing if you go shopping, is grass-fed beef, grass-fed dairy. You know, everything you do here, almost all of it, is grass-fed. So you got a good product. I don't think you have a hard time selling it.
Well, I talked about Kiwis purring, and Miles is purring like a pussycat with those words. You've referred to Winston and that he has got an elephantine memory. And we'll pick up the trade conversation, I think, later. I know we've got Fred Hochberg really looking forward to it. He's written another great book in addition to mine. Trade is not a four-letter word. That's right, isn't it? So there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, friend of New Zealand, Ambassador Senator Tom Udall.
Thank you. Thank you.